Welcome, one and all, to a collection of classic Eggman Badniks, and a Eggman-associated no good Nick for good measure as well. They'll be joining the Eggman variants on the shelvening, so why don't you take a look at the mastery that is my creations, and that one animal thing over there. But ignore him, except when we're talking about him. Now, behold my creations! Hey there, I'm Caden Rains, and welcome to my basement. Today we're looking at some action figures from the Jakks Pacific Classic Sonic line, starting with Mecha Sonic and going mostly in order of appearance to a degree. There's one towards the end we're going to kind of roll back to, but let's start with Mecha Sonic here, or at least the original Mecha Sonic. There's been a couple. If you're an Archie fan, this is Silver Sonic, even though they eventually made a different design for what they called Silver Sonic in that comic series. It was basically inspired by this guy, but officially he is Mecha Sonic. He came with these spikes, which I accidentally attributed to a Shy Guy in another video, but they came with this Mecha Sonic, 4-inch scale Mecha Sonic. He's, he's fine. Like all these 4-inch guys, they generally look all right. They generally have the same amount of joints across them, 3 for the legs, 2. This guy only has 2 for his arms, 1 at the shoulder, 1 at the elbow. His hands and / wrists do not move. It's because he's kind of got this like pile bunker effect, I guess, going. His neck tilts. He's got the red eye that not everybody notices in the game because he's on his side, so you only see the red dot. But it is, if you look at concept art, it is supposed to be just a red dot in the center that goes back and forth, or side to side, I suppose. His neck doesn't turn great. Well, I guess it does. I just had to pull it forward. Never mind. Bad on me. So he's, like a lot of these 4-inch ones, I would kind of prefer them to be bigger, especially since Mecha Sonic was bigger than Sonic in his first appearance. And I think all following Mecha Sonics were bigger, at least by a little bit. Metal Sonic is usually the exact same size as whatever version of Sonic he's going against, but Mecha is usually a little bit bigger. So it would be neat if he was bigger, but again, this is what happens when you keep things on the same scale, like the exact same scale, and don't give it any variety. So on the whole, fine figure. Like, again, I don't play with this stuff. What I'm doing now for this video to show posability is the most play these things get. Once I get them in the pose I like, they go on the shelf, and unless I'm changing my display, they don't really change. So I guess you just learn a little more about me, even though I think I've said this before. So anyway, again, if you're a classic fan or a robot fan and you've seen this guy, I do recommend him. There's nothing wrong with him. He could be bigger. So maybe they'll make a bigger one someday. Anyway, so after Mecha Sonic, though, what other metal variants might we see? So to go along with Mecha Sonic, we also have Metal Sonic, this being the classic variant. The difference between Metal Sonic Classic and Metal Sonic Modern isn't much. It's really just they made him taller, and his center body isn't quite as spherical. I know this isn't really a sphere, but it's pretty round. It's a little more oblong in the modern take, but otherwise, Metal Sonic, he doesn't get changed much because he's a good design, and they captured that well here. He kind of leans forward a bit. Again, he has the same joints or joint placements as most of the others. The major difference between him and Mecha as far as joints go is that he does have a wrist joint, although it can only go around. It doesn't go back or forth like his elbow does or his shoulder does. So there's that. He does come with an accessory, but it is the exact same spinning display sign, end of stage sign, that classic Eggman came with, so that's a little bit of a bummer. Since the face on it is just a sticker, I feel like they could have put something different on there. Maybe not Sonic, since this is coming with Metal Sonic, but you could have put Metal on there. There's no reason you couldn't have. So, accessory isn't great. But other than that, you get your Metal Hedgehog. You know, he always looks disappointed, but Metal Sonic is always kind of looking like that. Even when he goes Neo, he still looks angry because he never really gets what he wants, and that's to show up Sonic. The few times that he kind of does, they always come back to bite him in some way. So, that's Metal Sonic. If you like classic Sonic stuff, if you like robots, he's a good find. Because he's supposed to be the same size as Sonic, if you've got the classic Sonic figure from this line, then, you know, his size is good. He, unlike Mecha, I don't think needs to be a different size. So, I'm not going to complain about that. So, just a good figure overall. Moving on, though. Next comes the Egg Robo. So, I believe it showed up for the first time in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, whichever version you want. But it was also playable in Sonic R. I don't think it had the giant cannon in Sonic R. If it did, I apologize. But that cannon is its accessory. It comes out, but it's kind of a pain, so I'm not going to take it out. But, yeah, it clips in, I guess you could say. But it's not an easy clip. He's got a pretty good range of movements, shoulders, elbows, hands. Again, it's pretty much the same at the legs, except he doesn't have knee joints. All right, he has his feet go around, and there's like a pseudo joint there, but yeah. I was double checking because I was second guessing myself, but no, he doesn't have real joints there. Or if he does, mine suck. So his head goes around though. That's kind of fun. So you can do an R2-D2 move. The gun is kind of heavy, so if you don't pose it in certain ways, yeah, it's gonna cause his arm to drop. It's I guess it might depend on how stiff your joints are. Yeah, there he goes. So I do like the look of him, but that's a little bit of a bummer, the way that his accessory forces him to be posed in certain ways if you're going to keep it on him. But again, this is a pretty good overall look at a classic design. It's not one we get a lot of representation of in the series anymore. So the fact that it's there, that it's available, or it was available, it's probably hard to find at this point. But I think it's a good thing. And because it's kind of meant to be a metal version of classic Eggman, its size feels appropriate. Because most of the time, unless it's something he's riding in, Eggman doesn't make his robots taller than himself. Like the Sonic Adventure 1 robots, are, for the most part, the main ones I can think of that are bigger than him without being a mech of some sort. And we know how those ended. They all blew up at the end, and then Omega came out, and he was like 5 feet shorter than any of them. But we'll get to him another day. So that is Egg Robo, the original. There's 2 variants of him, so let's take a look at them next. Here is the first of the hard-boiled heavies that we've got today. As far as I know, there's only been 2 of the hard-boiled heavies from Sonic Mania that have come out so far. That being this one, the Heavy Gunner, and then Heavy King that we'll look at in a second. So in a lot of ways, Heavy Gunner is just a modified version of the Egg Robo. And that's fine. He's kind of mirrored. His gun hand is the left hand instead of the right. And he's got a fist instead of an open hand. But otherwise, he's a very similar amount of joints. Again, it kind of seems like he should be able to bend his knees, but mine won't. Oh, okay. I tried really hard, and okay, they must have just been really stiff with this mold. Maybe I can get the original Egg Robo to go too, but So there we go. I guess I just didn't play with the toys enough. I don't know who plays with their toys, but whatever. So other than that, it's still pretty similar in the overall. The one big difference I'd say is, even though his gun is a pretty heavy accessory, because it's not so long the way the Egg Robo's was, it kind of seems to stay, well, not when it's all the way out like that, it doesn't, but in general, he can hold it without toppling over in many more positions, and then I proved myself wrong. But I kind of like this one, holding it over his shoulder. Yeah, so that's the first hard-boiled heavy. Let's look at the big bad of that group. So here is the Heavy King, the leader of the hard-boiled heavies from Sonic Mania. He was the final boss of the group, and he's fine. He's regal looking. I don't really have much to say about him. His arms and legs work basically the same as the other one. His other two Egg Robos. He's got this staff instead of a gun, and it's cool. It's a lot lighter than the guns, so you can have him holding it in a bunch of different ways that are more expressive than what you can do with the guns on the Egg Robo or the Heavy Gunner. But other than that, he is a different mold. He's not the same thing, obviously, but he's still very similar to the other two overall as far as how he works. So, he's just, if you like the others, you'll probably like him. I will say, this is another one where being a 4-inch scale shows in the details. Like, that paint job isn't perfect. And I don't really expect perfect, but when you've got chips of the eye paint there on the, well, from the way we're looking at it, the left, chips on the eye paint, and then other red dots where they're not supposed to be, it just kind of shows that maybe if he was a 5-inch scale, it'd be better. Now, am I saying they need to start changing all of the Sonic lines to be 5-inch? No, even though I think that would be helpful for the detail. They've made so many at this point, I don't want them making future ones in a different scale. So, except for ones like Robotnik / Eggman. Like I've said before, modern Robotnik should be on a bigger scale. But anyway, that is Heavy King. That's the last of the robots for now, but there's one No Good Nick that's often associated with Robotnik that we're going to add into this review. Meet Fang the Sniper, or Knack the Weasel if you're a real one. Due to some localization shenanigans, he's got various different names. They're trying to bring him back to some classic content, like Superstars and whatnot, or whatever that last one was. I didn't care for that last game, but they're sticking to his original Japanese name of Fang the Sniper. He'll always be Knack the Weasel to me because I've read several hundred Archie comics, and that's what he went by. He also killed a good number of his family members in that series, or at least let them die. And he's also the reason that I don't think of this guy when I think of Mecha Sonic, because in Archie comics, Knack knocked out Sonic at one point and let Robotnik roboticize him, and that was Mecha Sonic to me, and it always will be. So anyway, back to where we're supposed to be talking about. His accessory is a wanted poster, which is kind of lame. Not that it's a wanted poster, but it's really just like cardstock. It's not even a piece of plastic. In fact, if you have this and you're taking it out of the box, it has tape on the back. You might be able to see, probably not. There's still some tape stain on it. But I was actually afraid I was going to rip it at one point, because it's just thick paper and not super thick. So I do like that it's pixelated, but it's a lame accessory. They should have given him his pop gun. They gave the Egg Robos giant cannons, but they couldn't give him his pop gun. It's literally got a cork in the top of it, but whatever. As far as most of the animal characters go, Mobians, whatever you want to call them, from this line, he's about what you'd expect from a classic character. He has no no elbow joints, just shoulder, and then his wrist can go around like that, head around, and then he's got one joint on his tail. I really wish they had one at his, the kink in his tail. I know he's supposed to be drawn with his tail in this pattern, but I think it would have been better if they put that joint in his tail. This is another one where he kind of has knees, but the boots, or they look like socks. I know they're not socks, but his boots kind of mean that even though his knees work, you're not going to be able to do much with that. It's not really great. So as far as looks go, he's fine. The only thing that kind of annoys me about the way he looks is that there's not a lot of definition between his tooth and his scraggle, his cheek fluffs, whatever. So that's kind of a bummer. Because, you can see from when it's, depending on the angle, the shadow of it. But I really think they should have just put a line around the tooth. Honestly, if I had steadier hands, I'd probably just paint one. Maybe I will someday. But that's my only real complaint with him. I am going to set him up with the Eggman Badniks and whatnot, because to me, he's always associated with Eggman. He's always doing dirty deals with Robotnik and whatnot. Like I said, he's the reason Sonic got roboticized in the Archie comics. And he's off in most of the games he appears. He's either trying to get something from Eggman or he's directly working for him. So he's going to go with the Badniks. So that's all the 4-inch scale Badniks and No Goodniks we've got today. But it looks like there's one more thing that's about to come in for show. This is the 8-inch scale Giant Mecha Sonic with a 2.5-inch Classic Sonic as well. This is not as old as some of the other figures that I normally review, mostly because right before I started to do this classic figure video, I found him on sale, and I had a gift card, and I could basically was able to get him for $20 off, and he's about a $32 thing. So I wasn't gonna pass on that, because the next time he goes on sale, I'll miss it. That's the way it works for me. I occasionally get good deals, but the things I'm looking for are generally not what I get deals on. So let's knock Sonic out of the way real quick. He's 2.5-inch scale. I generally don't get these except for some of the Badniks that are small. Like I have a Buzz Bomber and a Motobug and whatnot. But for the most part, I don't do these. So he's just going to race his way off screen so we can look at the one we actually care about. By pushing his middle spike down on the back of his head, it causes his eye and his jets on the back to light up. I probably wouldn't have bothered with the jets if it were up to me. Like if I was the designer, you can't really see it most of the time, and they're pointing down, so I don't really get the point of that. But otherwise, he's basically just a bigger scale version of the figure we looked at earlier in the video. The only real difference between his posability, other than being a little more stable just because he's got bigger joints, is that his hands actually open compared to the 4-inch scales who don't. Now, you're not going to be able to put too much in there, but you could put something in there, I suppose. Otherwise, he's just twice as big, so if you like the 4-inch scale, you'll probably like the 8-inch scale. The other thing he's got that 4-inch scale doesn't is that not only do his wheels on the back of his feet actually roll, but he's got these buttons on the top of his feet that cause these other wheels to drop down. Now, they don't drop down as much as I think they should, especially not the back ones, but they do allow him to roll. So, and he did that in the games, so good on them for making that work. Again, it's more of a playset thing than an action figure thing as far as I'm concerned. At least from my point of view, because once he gets positioned, I'm not going to mess with him much, and I'm not going to leave the wheels down in that process. So, but this does go to show that being bigger does allow more detail. Now, this is getting to an extreme. I don't want Sonic figures to be 8-inch scale. In fact, I think for most of them, 4-inch scale is good. It's just the paint job kind of suffers. The only one I wish they deviate from that scale in general is Eggman / Robotnik. So, I do like him, and the main reason I got him and like him more than the 4-inch scale, at least the main reason, is that there's a panel from old Archie. It's actually from near the end of the run, I guess. But it featured Silver Sonic, Metal Sonic, and Sonic. And I kind of want to recreate that. It's not even like an iconic panel from the series or anything, but it's stayed in my head, at least a little bit. And when I saw this one, which is not the same version that Archie used, because they had their own take on Metal Sonic, well, Silver Sonic, but they did have their own take on Metal Sonic too eventually, but I'm getting off topic. But I want to recreate that panel using this Mecha Sonic, modern Metal, and modern Sonic when I get to them. So that's going to be a little while, and I know there's not much point to it. I know none of you are crying out, Caden, don't recreate that old Archie panel. No one will get it but some other weirdos. Well, in case any of you are thinking it, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disappoint you. But that's the end of the classic figures and robots and whatever else you want to consider these guys today. So let's go find a place for them on the shelf and see how they look. And we'll just put this here to mark the edge of his territory. And there's the classic Badniks that I've got at the moment. Now, unlike the Skeletor setting over here, I do have a little bit of a story idea, like setting up a scene that I'll eventually get to, but it's going to require filling out the rest of the modern and other Badniks that are going to go over here. And then I'm also going to need to get some new stands, because I used up most of the ones that I really like the height of when I was making the Skeletor situation. For now, here are our Badniks, along with the various Robotniks / Eggmen. I've got the big guy in the back, looming over all, while some of the other big ones are, a step below, as well as his mini counterpart. So, let me know down below what you think of the Eggman / Robotnik setup. Do you think they should be set up in a different way? Do you think that the concept of a story scene on the shelves would be a good idea? But regardless of your thoughts, I'm hoping that you had a good time in my basement today, and I'll see you in the next one.